I'm Brittany, this is hualian, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things, and sometimes we read them, and today we start reading Heaven Official's Blessing, Volume 6, a volume that I have on very good authority, requires wine. But, here's the thing. So, I had wine. I got wine while I was watching the second season of I Told Sunset About You, because I was told to have wine for that as well, and I thought that I would have enough wine for at least the first stream of this volume. And then I didn't, because as it turned out, the bottle I got was slightly smaller than what I usually get. So, I will have wine for this, because of course I will. I just don't have it today. So unless the first 50 pages of this come with something particularly horrifyingly sad, I think I'm safe, but don't tell me. I'm specifically not looking at chat right now. Don't tell me, but I'm holding out hope that this is one of those times where MXTX leads you into a little bit of a false sense of security before walloping you over the head. So that is what we are doing today. We read for about 2 hours. We cover about 50 pages. I cough every now and then. It's asthma from when I was a kid. Don't worry about it. And that is what these streams are. So we just give people a couple of minutes to come on in. And let's see, aside from coughing, blah, 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 I apologize for starting late today. I had horrific sleep last night and the night before. So getting up today was not the easiest thing in the world. So I apologize for that. But do you think that anything was going to literally keep me from starting Volume 6 today? No, I'm too excited. We're doing the whole Mount Tonglu thing where we're trying to have some kind of effect on a potential new, supreme bad thing coming to fruition. Although if Huacheng was the last one, then how... See, that's another thing. How bad could it be? Universally bad, because obviously we have other, Supremes that are fucking awful. But I don't think maybe, inherently so, which might be one of the points of the entire story. I don't know. Without having the entire story to go off of, I tend to go plot blind. Because I fundamentally give writers, especially ones who are as good as MXTX, but don't tell her I told you that. I give them the benefit of the doubt that even though things might be building towards one thing, that it could technically go anywhere, right? That maybe this will be one of the writers who just does something super surprising and it just comes out of nowhere. So even though I may have, theories, I technically don't. I technically just can kind of be surprised by whatever, and I don't get that kind of perspective usually until I can see the whole thing. And since we're not there yet, I'm just kind of floundering and treading water, wondering where in the heck this could go. That's the other thing. This is the last 3 volumes. We're closing in on the end. And, my only experience with MXTX endings so far is The Untamed and Modazuche. So I'm not well in the slightest at all. But we'll be fine. This might be the second time I've put the book on my head. This is the amount of anxiety I'm experiencing. It's normal. Ignore me. I am deeply excited and as anxious as I am. I really should have wine. So now that we've given people a couple of minutes to come on in, and we've taken a couple of deep breaths to soothe the anxiety, and also hualian could at any time just kind of figure out who Huacheng is and what that means, and I'm sure we don't know everything about what that means, because this is MXTX, and she loves to hide the full picture until the perfect moment when she reveals the last bit of context or the last bit of information that ruins you even more than you were expecting. I really don't like her. Okay. All right. So we are, I mean, technically, with the way that books are numbered, we are on page, oh, if it'll tell me, 11 for chapter 92, which is called Cave of 10,000 Gods, Faces of the 10,000 Gods Hidden. So it's another one of those, titles that we'll only have context on when we get to the end of the chapter. Which actually, I kind of love those. It kind of makes every chapter a little bit of a mystery. You know? Most of them. Sometimes the titles are like hitting the nail on the head. But a lot of times they're mysteries. And I bet she did that on purpose. And to great effect. Because she's a freak and should be studied. So, to begin, Volume 6, which, by the way, has one of my favorite covers in the entire series. I might be a little bit of an angsty hoe, but this is legit one of my favorite covers in the series. I don't think to be surpassed by the obvious. What was that? Was it Volume 4 or Volume 3? You know, the one where they're sprawled out on the table. Like, how could that not be a favorite of mine personally? But this might be second so far, which is saying something because all the covers are gorgeous, right? They're always gorgeous. They have set such a high bar with MXTX covers that, I mean, it's a little obscene, frankly, but this is definitely one of my favorites. Also because my son, Ming, prominently featured. Thank you, as he deserves. I'm fine. I have there's a wine glass that it's like steel. There's a steel wine glass that I really want that I would name a Ming. I have my eye on it. It's on my wish list for patrons to gift to me if they so choose, because things like that can be like really fun. I've been getting a lot of co-hosts from people actually recently. I have to name a whole bunch of mugs, and so it's really great when I get a new one. And so this one I've placed, and I'm just sitting there hoping that one day it is chosen and I will have a co-host named Ming. That would be really convenient for this volume, actually. Because I was literally just going to put wine in the mugs that I have. In Hualian and Huachang, I was just going to put wine in this because fuck it. If I can put hot tea in a wine glass, I can put wine in a mug, you know? But if I had a Ming, I'd be able to put wine in a wine glass. I may have to... Okay, I need to write that down. I need to think about that, if I should just go ahead and grab it. Anyway, chapter 92, I almost said 1. I almost said chapter 1. Volume 6, I almost said chapter 1. Chapter 92. Hua Cheng's breath was warm, but his words made Shi Lian's blood run cold. Could there really be someone hiding in the Grand Hall? A thought flashed through Shi Lian's mind, and he quickly returned Hua Cheng's embrace. Because of fucking course he did. This is volume 6, and we've been dealing with this bullshit for a while now. He wasn't hugging him because he was afraid, of course. If there truly was someone hiding in the temple whom they hadn't noticed, then they must be a formidable character, and if that person sensed anything off, they might be forced to make a move. It would arouse suspicion if Hua Cheng was the only one hugging him and being so intimate. If the embrace was mutual, it might appear more natural. Whatever you gotta tell yourself, babe. Whatever you gotta, you do you. You'll get to it eventually. Man, if Wei Wuxian can get there, I believe in you. I have faith. It'll be fine. Whatever you gotta do. Shi Lian began to inconspicuously analyze their surroundings. Where do you think they're hiding? He whispered. There was only one entrance to the grand hall, which was the huge door they'd come through. The hall itself was completely empty. The whole room could be taken in at a glance, and there wasn't even a table or a chest that would provide a spot for someone to hide. Aside from the two of them, there were only the empty stone shells of the temple's attendants. The shells, Shilian and Huachang whispered in unison. Those stone people were hollow inside, which meant they could serve as a hiding spot. A human couldn't get inside, but a ghost certainly could. Starting with a creep factor. That's fine. I'm fine. There are many holes like that in this area. I still remember their general locations, so just stay close to me, Huachang stated. Take your time and it'll be fine. Gaga was walking too quickly. As it turned out, the mountain's body was quite weak. There were holes everywhere beneath the snow, large and small, but how many and how deep was unknown. But as they climbed, it seemed Huachang really did remember where all of them were. Shilian puffed a breath. All right, let's stick closer together, he suggested. Is that possible? It's page 2. I should really calm down. In any event, we can't yell or make loud noises on a snowy mountain like this, so it wouldn't be easy to call for help if anything happened. He stopped when they heard angry roars coming from up ahead. Are you done? Which good brother dared to yell like that on such a steep and perilous snowy mountain? Shilian was dumbfounded as he looked toward the source of the noise. Amidst the snow-covered landscape, he saw 2 little black dots engaged in a fight, their weapons clinking and clanking. One of them held a longbow and was shooting arrows non-stop. The other held a janmadao, is my haphazard attempt at that word, which comes with a footnote. That's a single-bladed, 2-handed saber meant to be wielded against cavalry. Speaking of writing things down. Oh, I literally wrote that on D&D plans. I literally wrote a Ming on all over my D&D plans. I'm surrounded by D&D plans. Can I get a scrap of paper? For the love of God? Here, graph paper. On a scrap D&D plan, at least. Okay, rewriting a Ming. And then, what the hell was I even... Oh, yeah, no, I want to see what that sword looks like. Janmadao. Alright. And swung with the vigor of a tiger. They struck down every single arrow. Both the blade and the arrows had a sheen of Vaiyaha. Where I skipped something. I swear. Holy shit, I did! How did that happen? I have read all of Modazushi on these streams. I have read almost the entirety of Heaven Official's Blessing. I've never actually skipped a page before. But I totally did. I've even had the feeling several times that I skipped a page and I hadn't skipped a page. Wow. There's a first time for everything. You are exactly right. Yeah, when Shilian was sure, I went, no. You're right. You're right. Y'all are right. First time for everything. Okay. Well then. Thank you for all the stop signs and red flags, by the way. I thought that the stream was buffering there for a second. I was very confused. But no. I was just being silly. Anyway, let's lead it to it with the last line of the... It was literally page 1. Literally page 1. This gonna be an interesting volume. Okay. Leading into the next page then. The proper next page. Those stone people were hollow inside, which meant they could serve as a hiding spot. A human couldn't get inside, but a ghost certainly could. When Shilian was sure they were both in agreement, he started to speak, but then he inadvertently looked up, and his pupils shrank. There was someone standing 6 meters behind Huachang. I couldn't have skipped this page? You guys couldn't have given me that? We couldn't have... It was fine. It was gonna be fine. You had to give me that mental image? That was really important? Okay. I love you too. Hang on, I got too many versions of my face running around. Ooh, okay. This person seemed to have been a young man of higher status. These statues each documented a young citizen's death, so most were curled into balls or hugging their heads and wailing. This statue was one of the very few that was standing. But what made Hualian notice him wasn't his pose, it was his face. Although the stone person's face was barely distinguishable, Hualian could still make out some details. The left side was smiling, and the right side was crying. "It's that one," Hualian blurted. He drew his sword and struck just as Huachang called out, "Gaga?" The stone person shattered and broken fragments of the shell scattered across the floor. Although there was nothing inside, Hualian didn't dare drop his guard, and he began turning over every single shard until Huachang cut his hand. "Gaga, what did you see just now?" Hualian gathered a few fragments to show him. "Sanlung, that stone person. His face, it was White No-Face's mask." Okay, so this might be a little important. Huachang's expression changed slightly, but still he said, "Wait a moment." He gathered and pieced together the shards. When the face was reconstructed, the two fell silent. Hualian had clearly seen a half-crying, half-smiling ghost face, but the face that Huachang had reconstructed had indistinct features, no different from the other stone statues. Oof. That's rough, buddy. Was it a hallucination? Had he been bewitched by an illusion spell? Sitting around wouldn't get them answers, so they searched the hall, smashing every stone person to ash as they went. But after giving it some thought, they realized that it was more important to deal with the others who were surely rushing to the summit at that moment. They decided not to stick around waiting for Pei Ming to return and left the temple to scale the mountain. The mountain seemed to have a peculiar gravity. They tried, but the silver butterflies couldn't carry them, and flying on swords was a non-starter. They could only climb on foot. The higher they hiked, the steeper the path became, and the colder the air grew. The snow was sparse at first, but it became thicker as they ascended until it could swallow almost half a boot. They were up to their knees in it after hours of climbing, and their trek was becoming more and more arduous. Hualian didn't feel cold since they had been hiking non-stop. He was instead covered in a thin sheen of sweat, and his red cheeks gave a shock of color to his powdery white face. He wiped away the sweat and looked back, about to speak to Huachang, but suddenly his step caught nothing, and he dropped 1/2 meter. His body had sunk into the heavy snow. Oh no. Thankfully, Huachang had been following him closely and pulled him up quite easily, like he'd been prepared for it. "Gaga, be careful." Hualian stood next to him and looked back at where he'd stumbled. A large section of snow had caved in, revealing a deep, dark hole that led to somewhere unknown. If Hualian hadn't grabbed hold of the edge in time, or if Huachang had moved too slowly, he would have fallen in for sure. There are many holes like this in this area. I still remember their general locations, so just stay close to me, Huachang stated. "Take your time and it'll be fine." Gaga was walking too quickly. As it turned out, the mountain's body was quite weak. There were holes everywhere beneath the snow, large and small, but how many and how deep was unknown. But as they climbed, it seemed Huachang really did remember where all of them were. Hualian puffed a breath. "All right, let's stick closer together," he suggested. "In any event, we can't yell or make loud noises on a snowy mountain like this, so it wouldn't be easy to call for help if anything happened." He stopped when they heard angry roars coming from up ahead. "Are you done?" Which good brother dared to yell like that on such a steep and perilous snowy mountain? Hualian was dumbfounded as he looked toward the source of the noise. Amidst the snow-covered landscape, he saw 2 little black dots engaged in a fight, their weapons clinking and clanking. One of them held a longbow and was shooting arrows non-stop. The other held a Janmadao. Better second attempt? And swung with the vigor of a tiger. They struck down every single arrow. Both the blade and the arrows had a sheen of spiritual light, and both parties were shouting curses at each other. "I already said I didn't kill that little bastard. I'm looking for them too," the man wielding the blade yelled. It was Feng and Fu Yao. Without even trying to guess why they had come here too, Shilian very nearly let out a shout of "Shut up!" However, he caught himself in time and swallowed it before he added to the noise. If he started roaring the same way they were, and the three of them all began screaming at each other, could the snow on the mountain really remain still? Huachang hugged his arms and cocked an eyebrow. Don't they know that'll cause an avalanche if they yell like that? They can't be that foolish, Shilian said. Maybe they do know, but that's just the way they are. They forget everything else when they're angry. Nanfeng and Fu Yao were both furious and cursed at each other as they fought, but they were too far away from Shilian. He couldn't tell what they were fighting over from their broken, muffled phrases, and for their part, they completely failed to notice that anyone else had arrived. Shilian wanted to rush over and pull them apart, but there was no way he could make it there in time to stop them with the heavy snow dragging down his pace and the deep holes lurking beneath. He only managed to run 2 steps before he stumbled over another hole, and he came to a stop. We can't just let them keep fighting like this. We have to stop them. As soon as he said so, a silver butterfly darted past like an arrow. Shilian was startled, but relaxed a moment later. Good idea. If neither of them could make it in time, why not just use a wraith butterfly to fly over and transmit communication? As expected, the silver butterfly's speed was miraculously fast. It made it over to the brawling duo after only 3 more shouts, but before Shilian could try to speak through it, he saw Huachang's expression turn cold. Shilian noticed something was amiss. What's wrong? The smile on Huachang's lips had disappeared completely, replaced by a look that was as frigid as the snowy mountain upon which they stood. What? Senlong, what's going on? Shilian pressed. Huachang's lips twitched, but he didn't manage to answer before Shilian suddenly felt an inexplicable wave of panic. His head shot up to look at the top of the mountain, and his eyes widened. Giant chunks of the snowy white bluffs were trembling, and then they collapsed. Even engrossed in their heated fight, Nanfeng and Fu Yao also sensed that soundless pressure. Both looked up, and they finally realized what was about to happen. The snowy mass was like an enormous embankment that stretched for 1,000 miles, and when in the next second it broke, it carried a snow tsunami along with it. It rumbled, rolled, and pushed down toward them. They had caused an avalanche. Shilian grabbed Huachang's hand, turned, and ran, but after dashing a few steps, he remembered that the other two were much closer to the avalanche's charge. He stopped abruptly, looking back. Sure enough, they had ceased their aggression to flee together. Fu Yao didn't get very far before stumbling into a hole and sinking down more than halfway. He was buried up to his chest in snow. Although Nanfeng ran faster than him, he hesitated for a moment and looked back, seeming like he wanted to save him, but the wave of snow was already bearing down. Shilian released Roye the moment before they were swallowed. The white silk bandage instantly stretched far into the distance, lassoed Fu Yao and Nanfeng with sharp precision, and yanked them up. Gaga, leave them, don't bother, Huachang said darkly. Shilian held Roye tightly, dragging the two as he ran. I can't! They might end up buried for 100 years if this goes wrong. Too late, Huachang said, his voice dire. What? Shilian cried. He looked up, and the enveloping shadow bearing down overhead came crashing in. Nanfeng and Fu Yao had stalled Shilian after all. The thick, icy wave of snow surged relentlessly and swallowed him whole, separating him from Huachang. The force knocked Shilian everywhere, and he tumbled along with the coursing snow. Although he somehow managed to keep struggling, there was just too much snow and the force was too powerful. Shilian was buried again and again, suffocating over and over each time his head went under. In the end, Shilian couldn't hang on. With a final shout of Senlong, he was devoured by the icy snow current. And that's a scene break. Damn. There are better ways to start a volume, I feel. As in less life-threatening and also creepy. Whew. Not the best situation. And now, granted, it is only a matter of time before Huachang finds Shilian. This we know. But still, An unknown amount of time passed before the snowy mountain finally calmed. A long moment later, somewhere in the field, a pile of snow shifted a few times before a hand burst out from underneath. The hand felt around randomly, then an arm poked out, then a shoulder, and then finally a head. Face covered in chunks of snow, he took a deep breath the instant he broke free, then let loose a flurry of coughing. Soon after, and with some difficulty, the man crawled his way out, shaking his head as he sat down on the snow. It was Shilian. Digging himself out from beneath that heavy layer of snow was not unlike his prior experience, digging himself free of a grave. Shilian's face and hands were chapped red from frostbite and essentially numb, but he only bothered to rub his face a few times and huff some hot breaths on his hands before looking up with a lost expression. There was not a trace of that captivating red in the sprawling blanket of white. And Shilian couldn't even call out for him. It would be all over if he caused another avalanche. He could only rise to his feet and wander aimlessly, all alone in that snowy world. He called out in a small voice as he walked, "Senlong? Senlong? Nenfeng? Fuyao?" It was strange. Although he was walking the same path they had been hiking before, the air seemed so much colder than when he and Huacheng had been together. Royer was also gone from his hand. Shilian was puzzled, as Royer shouldn't have slipped off. It would still wrap itself around him even if he let go of it. So what happened? He knew something was wrong, but couldn't put his finger on what, so he continued to wander in confusion. Suddenly, someone emerged from within the billowing snow ahead. His white robes and black hair flapped in the wind, and he kept his head down as he slowly approached. Shilian was delighted at the sight of this traveler and pushed forward. "My friend, you—" But just as he spoke, the man looked up. He was wearing a chilling white mask, half of it smiling, the other half crying. Fuck this imagery! Shilian screamed at the sight of it as though he'd been stabbed. His eyes flew open at the sound of his own scream, and he shot upright. He panted harshly for several moments before his shaken mind could press that he wasn't standing on the snowy mountain at all. He was lying in a dark, shadowy place. So it had been a dream. No wonder something had felt off. Shilian exhaled a long breath as he relaxed, wiping away the cold sweat on his forehead. After feeling around for a bit, he determined that there was flat stone beneath him, covered with a blanket of grass. Feng hung from his waist, and Royer was wrapped snugly around his arm. Shilian steadied himself and ignited a palm torch to illuminate the room. He sat up immediately and called out, "Senlong, are you there?" The moment the flames brightened the room, Shilian discovered that there was a person standing right next to him in the darkness, soundless and silent. This was no small shock, and Shilian was awash in cold sweat as his hands flew to Feng Xin. There was no way he wouldn't have noticed someone lurking so close by. However, the cold sweat dissipated when he looked closer. It wasn't a living person, but rather a stone statue, and not one of the many stone statues of the victims of the volcano's eruption. This was clearly a man-made sculpture. Palm torch in hand, Shilian scanned the room and was soon certain of where he found himself. The place where he lay was a cavern for cultivation. He had once gone into seclusion to cultivate in a place like this, so he was familiar with this type of chamber. It meant that the sculpture inside the cavern was not a regular statue, but a divine icon for worship. The divine statue had been erected in a cavern with an arched ceiling. Its figure was long and slender. Its bearing was natural and relaxed. Ooh, art. And its pose was graceful. Its right hand rested on the hilt of the sword at its waist. It had been sculpted with sublime skill. Even the flowing lines and folds of its robes were exquisite. However, there was something peculiar about it. The face of this divine figure was covered by a light veil. The veil was light as flowing smoke. While it was quite strange to see a divine statue with its face obscured like this, it wasn't ugly. Instead, it added a mysterious sort of beauty. Shilian had never seen a divine statue like this, displayed with its face covered. He unconsciously reached out to pull the veil off, but was interrupted by a voice from behind. "Gaga." Shilian's head whipped around. A figure in red had appeared at the entrance of the cavern without him realizing. It was Huacheng. This is probably a good time to show the art. Since, Huacheng is just standing there behind him. Oh, no, a little bit longer. Like, that is creepy and beautiful all at once. I'm concerned. Oh, no, that's way too much of my face. Hang on. Hang on. Back to normal. Thank you. The mysterious face of that divine statue instantly went to the back of Shilian's mind. And he rushed over to him. Senlong, thank goodness, I was wondering where you were. Are you alright? Are you hurt? That avalanche was so sudden. Huachong entered the room. I'm fine. How's Gaga? I'm always fine, Shilian said. What is this place? Once he left the cavern, it became clear that this place was far more expansive than expected. The corridor he found himself in seemed quite long, and who knew where it led? Shilian had long ago gotten used to Huachong having the answers to everything, yet this time he replied, I don't know. Most likely under the snowy mountain. Shilian was amazed, and I'd thought it was a shelter Senlong had found. I can't believe even you don't know where you are. Woo! I can't believe even you don't know where you are. Emphasis syllable. It helps when they're correct. Well, this was a first. Huachong had memorized the location of every ditch on the mountain path, but he wasn't familiar with this place. The cave network clearly wasn't small. Had he really never stumbled upon it before? Shilian couldn't help but find it a bit strange, but he didn't press the matter and instead raised his palm torch higher. How did we get here? Huachong summoned a few silver butterflies and let them flutter about to shine their faint light. Maybe we stepped wrong and fell into a ditch, he replied evenly. That was the only logical explanation, as the alternative was that someone had intentionally put them here. Shilian couldn't help but recall the dream he'd just had, and a slight shiver went down his spine. Remembering something else, he asked, We're here, so where are Nanfeng and Fuyao? At the mention of those two, a trace of hostility flashed across Huachong's face. Probably buried in the snow. Who cares? They're heavenly officials. This won't kill them, he replied unsympathetically. Shilian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hey! First one of the volume. Take a shot. Even if they can't die, it still won't feel great to be buried for decades if no one helps dig them out. Maybe they fell in here too, so let's search for them. By the way, Senlong, what did you hear them say when your silver butterfly flew over? Huachong snorted. Just some meaningless argument, as if it could have been anything pleasant. Shilian doubted it was that simple, otherwise he couldn't complain. Otherwise he couldn't explain Huachong's sudden change of expression when the wraith butterfly overheard the fight. Even now, Huachong's eye was extremely unkind as he snorted. But if he wasn't going to tell, then Shilian wasn't going to pry. The two continued down the cave's long corridor. After walking for a while, they discovered the stone tunnel beneath the snow was much more complex than they had initially thought. There wasn't just one path straight through, but many forks that branched off into various other caverns, large and small. And every one of those caverns held a divine statue. Some of the figures were teenagers, others were young men. The statues were all in unique poses, in lazy repose, leaning as though intoxicated, sitting poised, dancing with a sword. The clothing was also ever-changing. Magnificent ceremonial robes, plain clothes, rags, half-naked, and more. The level of skill differed between sculptures as well. Some of the work was rough and unrefined, while some was so extraordinarily exquisite and detailed it was astonishing. They probably hadn't all been sculpted by the same person, but the sheer number of them and the wealth of varieties made this a spectacular sight. Shilian admired them as they walked, and he couldn't help but exclaim in awe, This is a cave of 10,000 gods. I wonder who chose to build one in this place. They must have been an incredibly devout believer. However, all the divine statues shared the same peculiarity. Their faces were covered by light veils. Some of the veils were large enough to cover the statue's whole body, revealing only the hem of its robes or its feet. Shilian really was quite curious and wanted to pull the veil from a divine statue to see its face, but Huachong spoke up behind him. Gaga, I suggest you don't. Like, really, I'm getting major Doctor Who vibes. You know? Like, I don't know if you see Doctor Who, I don't know if you watch Doctor Who, but if you do, there's some, like, stone angels in it, and they're really not, you don't really look at statues the same way after that, and, I'm automatically nervous. Deeply, deeply nervous. Yeah. Oh, so nervous I'll lose my spot. Shi Lian looked back. Why not? Doesn't San Lung think these statues are odd? Yeah, you have no idea how odd statues can be. Don't blink. Hua Chang approached him with hands clasped behind and explained, it's precisely because they're odd that it's best that you don't uncover them. If someone covered their faces, they must have had a reason. Spiritual energy gathers in the head, and we can't be certain how the spiritual energy these strange statues have gathered would react if a veil is removed. He paused for a moment, then continued. Gaga, weren't you searching for your two servants? Since we haven't found them yet, it'd be better not to touch these statues. Best to avoid any unexpected complications. While his explanation sounded slightly far-fetched, it made logical sense. It wouldn't be a laughing matter if removing a veil awakened something within these statues. I've seen that one meme too often. I hope this doesn't awaken something within me. It could become a whole different situation if you... I'm fine. My apologies. Shi Lian wasn't prone to touching what he shouldn't. He thought it over and, in the end, dropped his hand. I was only curious which deity these sculptures depict, that's all. There was something else strange. Hua Chang was not the kind of person who feared unexpected complications. If they saw what the veil covered, so be it. Shi Lian hadn't expected him to use that as the reason not to touch them. This is the kingdom of Wu Yang, so they're... Motherfucker. This is the kingdom of Wu Yang, so they're probably the crown prince of Wu Yang, Hua Chang said dismissively. Nothing notable. Ah! I'm okay. I'm alright. I'm fine. It's fine. I just don't know. Is it someone related, either literally or, tangentially, related to Shi Lian? Is it Shi Lian himself? I don't know. I haven't been able to put that one together yet. Shi Lian countered, I don't think so. Oh, what do you mean? Hua Chang asked. Shi Lian gazed at him. Judging by the murals we saw along the way, the clothing worn by the crown prince of Wu Yang and the Wu Yang people was particularly bright in color. As the country existed 2 millennia ago, the prevailing style of dress was ancient and coarse, and a little wild. The clothing on these divine statues is quite different, though. I don't think these statues have anything to do with the crown prince of Wu Yang. In fact, the sculptor might not have been from Wu Yang at all. Hua Chang smiled brightly at him. Is that right? Gaga really has an eye for detail. Shi Lian also smiled. Oh, no, it's simply that the style of these statues, the sculpting work, the clothing design, and the way the details, such as the flow of dress, are handled, all looks like something from a later period. And it's one I'm more familiar with, too. The style of Shen Lei. That's not better, Shi Lian. That's not better. What the Shi Lian, I need you to be a little, just a little genre aware, baby. Please. Otherwise, we're not going to make it through the... Well, no. You have a very devoted boyfriend, so you are going to make it through this story, kind of, no matter what, if he has anything to say about it. But you're not going to make it through this story if you don't just have a little awareness. Just a little genre. I'm Crumbs. A crumb, please. Abate my anxiety. Although that'd be a cute trick. Where was I? Hua Chang quirked his eyebrows. It seems Gaga is also deeply gifted in this topic. No, it's nothing. You'd naturally gain a bit of knowledge after seeing a lot of something, and that includes divine statues, Shi Lian said. Although he couldn't quite put his finger on it, his instincts told him that there was something off with Hua Chang since he'd awoken. It was only now that he finally realized what was amiss. There was a subtle sort of nervousness about him. However, Shi Lian still didn't pry. He said instead, since Sun Lung thinks it's best to not inspect them, let's stay cautious. Hua Chang gave a light nod, and the pair continued onward. Hua Chang's nervous? Hua Chang couldn't be bothered ever. Hua Chang, I laugh in the face of danger. Hua Chang, just as long as Shi Lian's not hurt, then who gives a shit? Is nervous? I needed wine for these 50 pages, didn't I? Don't answer that. Where on earth? Hua Chang gave a light nod, and the pair continued onward. Soon they came to another fork in the road, and Hua Chang headed left without hesitation. Shi Lian paused and didn't follow. Hua Chang looked back. What is it? Sen Lung's never been in this cave before, right? Shi Lian asked. Of course not. Then why are you so sure that we should go left? Not sure necessarily, Hua Chang said. I'm just choosing blindly. Since you've never been here before, how can you charge forward blah, 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 blah. How can you charge forward blindly? Shouldn't we consider which way to go more carefully? Hua Chang smiled. We should go blindly precisely because I've never been here before. No matter how cautious we are, we know nothing about this place's layout. So we might as well... Oop, I scraped the mic, that was my fault. So we might as well boldly bet on our luck. And my luck has always been better. I mean, his hot guy shit. Although that certainly made sense, Hua Chang had always let Shi Lian choose the way when they went out. It wasn't often that he took the initiative and led. Shi Lian nodded. They were just about to enter the tunnel on the left when Shi Lian hastily spoke up. Wait, Sun Lung, do you hear that? What? To the right, Shi Lian said. There are voices. Hua Chang's expression changed subtly, and after listening intently for a while, he said, Gaga, I think you're mistaken. There's nothing there. There is, Shi Lian insisted. Listen closely. It's a man's voice. Hua Chang tried listening again and frowned. I really don't hear anything. Shi Lian was taken aback. Am I hallucinating again, he wondered. Your Highness, there's something fishy about this. There might be tricks afoot, Hua Chang said. I suggest we talk after we get out. Shi Lian hesitated for a moment, but in the end he still declared, No, it might be Nanfeng and Fu Yao. I must go take a look. Then he dashed off down the path while Hua Chang called after him, Gaga, don't run off. But whoever had been shouting must have fallen into an extremely dangerous situation that allowed no delays, and Shi Lian didn't dare to be careless. He continued to rush down the right-hand path. The farther he went down the tunnel, the clearer he could hear a man's angry roars. Shi Lian was delighted. It really is Nanfeng and Fu Yao. Shi Lian didn't know how long he'd spent hurrying through the winding tunnel, but he finally found the source of the voices in a giant cave. There were no divine statues in this cavern, but instead a deep pit, and that pit was precisely where Nanfeng and Fu Yao's screaming was coming from. It looked like they were both trapped at the bottom, unable to climb up, but they were still yelling passionately at each other, so their lives likely weren't in danger at the moment. It was too dark in the depths of the pit to see anything. Shi Lian cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted from above, Hey, what happened to you guys? When the two in the pit heard someone up above, they instantly stopped arguing. Fu Yao's reply came first. Your Highness, is that you? Hurry and pull us up. Nanfeng, on the other hand, didn't speak. Shi Lian was puzzled. You guys can't climb up on your own? The pit isn't that deep. What's happening down there? Perhaps it was because he'd been fighting the entire way, but Fu Yao was full of fire. If we could climb up on our own, we would have done it already. Duh! Can't you see for yourself, Your Highness? Shi Lian squinted. Well, I can't see much right now. Do you still have spiritual power? Can you light a palm torch so I can see what the situation is down there? If you can't, I'll throw a fireball down. But before he could finish his sentence, the two at the bottom yelled in unison, Don't! Their voices rang with alarm and terror. Do not light any fires, Fu Yao yelled. If he couldn't light a fire, he'd have to find another way to illuminate the place. Xi Lian's first reaction was to look behind him. Senlong, however, there was no one there. Hua Cheng hadn't followed him. Xi Lian was surprised. At first he felt slightly uneasy, then confused. There was surely no way Hua Cheng could have lost his way, right? Hua Cheng had been too anxious. Hua Cheng had been acting quite strangely ever since they entered the Cave of 10,000 Gods, but Xi Lian couldn't quite put his finger on why. He looked to his left and right, then discovered a tiny silver butterfly resting on his shoulder. He touched it tentatively. Hello? The wraith butterfly fluttered at his touch, but didn't fly away. It seemed to want to show him its wings. Over the course of their journey, Hua Cheng had told Xi Lian that his silver butterflies fell into various categories. Xi Lian didn't know which category this one belonged to or what its duties were, but it could at least shine some light regardless of its purpose. Thus he asked, "Can you go down and take a look for me?" Sure enough, the silver butterfly fluttered its wings and flew into the pit. Xi Lian called out his thanks and waited until it reached the bottom. Once the soft silver light illuminated the situation below, Xi Lian couldn't help but widen his eyes. The bottom of the dark pit was covered by an eerie field of white. The entire hole was blanketed with a thick bed of silk. It's not like spun silk, is it? It's not like some spider shit. We're not about to deal with some kind of gigantic spider shit. Feng and Fu Yao had been tied up in that silk so thoroughly that they'd been bundled into 2 cocoons, like 2 little flies stuck in a spider's web. Oh, man! Come on! And the only thing is that if it's not a spider, it's just going to be something worse. Because that's how she does it. That's just what she do. Their faces were battered black and blue, and their heads were covered in blood, but they might have done that to each other during their earlier fight. Xi Lian couldn't help but give himself a pat on the back for his caution. The entire pit might have been set ablaze had he thrown down a torch. "What's going on?" Xi Lian asked. "Is that a spider's web? Could this be an arachnid spirit's lair?" "Who knows?" Fu Yao yelled, desperate to escape. "We can't break free anyway." Feng, on the other hand, bore an unreadable expression. At first, he had looked like he also wanted to call for help, but he'd suddenly swallowed his words when he'd seen that Xi Lian was the one who'd come. "Don't come down yet. The spider silk is really tough," Feng said instead. "It'll be hard to break free once it grabs you." "I won't come down," Xi Lian said. After deliberating for a moment, Xi Lian tied one end of Roye to the hilt of Feng Xin, planning to lower the sword to just see if it'd work. But Roye had only crept down halfway before the web discovered it. Ooh, fuck no! Sentient web? The tendrils of silk shot upward with violent intent at this interloper. Roye coiled away in terror, but it was too late. The webbing snagged the bandage, wrapped around it, and yanked it down, pulling Xi Lian in as well. We really can't have nice things for more than 5 seconds. She just doesn't let us have it. Not ever. It was earlier on the page, the same page, that he said, "It'll be hard to break out if it grabs you." Hell, it was just a previous, paragraph. It was a paragraph and a couple sentences away. I'm fine. It's fine. Xi Lian had never imagined that this web would be so strong and cunning. The moment Xi Lian fell into the pit, the white tendrils of silk charged forward and trussed him up. The rest of the silk tendrils crawled along to further secure the cocoons that trapped Feng and Fu Yao. Fu Yao was absolutely furious. "How come you fell in too? Now look at us, 3 stupid fools. Let's all just die here together." "What are you griping about?" Feng shot back. "This only happened because he was trying to save us." Xi Lian, on the other hand, was tumbling about and laughing. Feng and Fu Yao looked at him, dumbfounded. "Did you hit your head on the way down? Have you lost your mind?" Fu Yao asked. Tears rolled from the corners of Shi Lian's eyes, and he said with much difficulty, "No, what's with this web? Why is it so ticklish? I can't." The silk bed had caught him gently when he fell, and the tendrils that had bound him seemed to touch him with care and love. They brushed softly against Shi Lian's body while they worked, as if they were tickling him. Shi Lian curled into a ball, fighting back with tenacity. No, don't wait, stop, I give, stop! Only then did the white silk tendrils bind his hands behind his back and stop their ticklish dance. Feng and Fu Yao stared at him. A moment later, Fu Yao said grumpily, "How come it was so rough when it tied us up, but so lenient with him? It hasn't even covered his face." Shi Lian finally caught his breath. Are your faces uncovered too?" Fu Yao rolled his eyes. "They were covered. We had to use our teeth to tear holes after we woke up. We couldn't have shouted otherwise." Shi Lian tried struggling a bit, but the silk webbing was tough and unyielding, plus his ribs faintly hurt from laughing too hard. For now he was out of commission. He decided to relax a bit, lying down flat. What kind of spidery creature could be related to Huachong? Because unless, a clear, fond, not prejudice, what's the word I'm looking for? Not predisposition. A clear preference, sure, we'll go with that. For Shi Lian, you kind of automatically go there, especially at this point. "So how did you two end up here?" "Don't know," Fu Yao replied. "When the avalanche hit, snow came crashing down on us. When we woke up, we were already here." No, Shi Lian said. "I mean, why did you come to Mount Tonglu?" Fu Yao was furious the instant the topic was raised. "I was pursuing that ghost woman, Lan Chung. And the fetus spirit. Who knows why he's here?" "Me? I'm here to chase after that mother and child too," Feng answered. "Then why didn't you go after them?" Fu Yao spat. "Why did you hit me? My general has already said that he had nothing to do with the fetus spirit. He didn't kill either of them. His goodwill was taken for ill. There's honestly no point in trying to be a good person." Shi Lian mediated out of habit. All right, stop. I understand the situation now. Stop fighting, stop arguing. You're the ones who caused that avalanche, so can you just give it a rest? Let's think of a way out together. However, Feng was incensed. "Does your general really not realize how he usually acts? He has no right to complain if people are suspicious of him." Fu Yao glared. "What did you say? I dare you to say that again." Feng glared even harder. "I do dare, and I will say it again. You never had goodwill for anyone. You just want to show benevolence to people you can't stand so you can secretly feel all smug about it later. You're after your own satisfaction, and you love to watch everyone else make fools of themselves. Don't give me that goodwill taken for ill garbage, and don't you dare think that you're a good person. Genuinely good people aren't like you. You've never been one." Veins popped in Fu Yao's forehead, and his lips began to twitch. "You've made all that up. It's pure nonsense." "You know the best whether it's nonsense, as if I don't know you," Feng shouted. Those veins now bulged all the way down Fu Yao's neck. "What right do you have to lecture me? Looking down on people from so high up. Careful, you might fall and break a leg." "I'm better than you at everything," Feng yelled. "Do you think no one knows about that shitty stunt you pulled back then?" The mere mention of this mysterious incident seemed to inflame Fu Yao even more, his fire fueled by shame. "Yes, I admit I did it. But how much better are you than me, really?" "Acting like you're the model of loyalty. Didn't you ditch the boss too when you got a wife? Didn't your wife and son suddenly become more important? Everyone does things for themselves. Everyone makes themselves top priority. Aren't you embarrassed to keep hanging that ancient shitty deed over my head?" When he heard wife and son, Feng's outrage exploded. "You fucking... You... Although neither could move, they were so intent on their argument that they didn't realize the way they addressed each other had slipped. They had dropped your general and my general in favor of you and me, and in their fury they had completely failed to notice what this exposed. Only now did they realize their terror. Shilian had long since stopped talking. Nanfeng and Fuyao both whipped their heads over to look in Shilian's direction and saw that he'd silently flipped on the silk bed, turning over and only showing them his back. I saw nothing. Wait, I heard nothing. Shilian faced the stone wall as he politely asked, "Are you two going to keep this up? I won't comment on anything else you were discussing, but I do think that someone's wife and son should be most important. There's nothing wrong with that. It's basic human sentiment. But all this ancient history, let's not stew in it. Let's think of a way to escape." "You already knew?" Fu Yao cut him off. Since it didn't seem he could get away with it any longer, Shilian could only concede, "Yeah." "When did you find out? How did you find out?" Fu Yao said in disbelief. Shilian didn't have the heart to tell the truth. Instead, he replied, "I forget exactly. The real answer was that he'd known everything for a very, very long time. He'd already vaguely suspected it on Mount Yujun, and by the time they set foot in Banyue Pass, he'd confirmed it. These junior martial officials from the middle court, they didn't actually exist. Nanfeng and Fu Yao were merely clones created by Feng Xin and Mu Qing." Wait a second! It... How does... I... How does that... That feels brilliant, but I feel stupid. How is that possible? If it was so brilliantly done, then I shouldn't feel bad. I really shouldn't feel bad for not knowing it. But I feel so stupid. Fu Yao seemed like he couldn't believe his real identity had been seen through so easily, and he began to relentlessly interrogate Shilian. When? How? There must have been something that gave it away. What was the flaw? Fuck if I know. I mean, obviously they have a similar... But, like, people can just have similar, you know... God damn it! Shilian really couldn't bear to tell him the truth. There weren't any secrets to give away because they had flaws all over them. The three grew up together after all. How could Shilian not recognize the way they behaved and spoke? From the sloppy fake names... Oh, fake names. Has a footnote. The Nan of Nanfeng is the same character used in Feng Xin's heavenly title, Nanyang. And the Feng is the same character used in Feng Xin's proper name, Fu Yao. Literally means to take off / take flight. Figuratively, it means someone who climbs the ladder quickly or an ambitious person. From the sloppy fake names to the completely unchanged personalities, it was too easy to guess. If he hadn't realized who was behind those two skins, he would have lived all these years for nothing. Yeah, rub it in. There were always some things one couldn't say, and some things one couldn't do. For example, one couldn't easily roll their eyes or cuss when minding their behavior as a heavenly official, but they could be much freer and more relaxed while wearing a different identity. Thus, Shilian never felt the need to expose them. Fu Yao, no, now he should be called Mu Qing, gritted his teeth and said coldly, "So, you've known who we are for a long time, but you never said anything. You quietly watched us put on an act. Am I correct?" That's the end of the chapter. We're on page 35, chapter 93. Cave of 10,000 Gods. Faces of the 10,000 Gods revealed. Shit! I didn't want to... God damn. Seeing that he was taking the matter quite hard, Shilian decided to try to give some guidance. Actually, it's not that big of a deal. Muqing sneered. I knew I was right. Was it fun? Did you enjoy watching me act? Now that they were being honest with each other, Muqing was honestly tearing him a new one. Then Feng, or Feng Xin, rather, only looked awkward at first, but in the end he couldn't let Muqing's words slide without comment. What's with that tone? Muqing was pale-faced and thin-skinned, and his entire head turned bright red whenever his blood started rushing, making it impossible to hide that he was upset. He whipped his head around. What tone? Don't forget you're one of the jesters here too. I'm not as generous as you are to have no complaints about being someone's... to have no complaints about being someone's entertainment for so long. I wasn't trying to watch you guys make fools of yourselves, Shilian said. And stop thinking everyone is as narrow-minded as you are, Feng Xin added. His Highness still tried to help you, even when your shitty deeds landed you in Heaven's prison. Ha! Oh, thank you so much. But I ended up in prison thanks to your son. What, you want to fight for real? You're not afraid to sire a son, but you are afraid to talk? Ooh, we getting personal now. Feng Xin really wanted to knock him dead for raising the subject of his son. Unfortunately, all three of them were still rolled up tight by the silk webbing, so he couldn't move a muscle. Feng Xin and Muqing could only curse at each other, all manners and class gone. Feng Xin's face was getting redder and redder from anger, and Shilian was afraid he'd blow his top soon and start cursing up a storm. So Shilian tried to wiggle a bit, managing to rock back and forth a few times, and eventually roll to Muqing's side. Muqing, can you try turning around? Muqing stopped his yelling and took a breath. What do you want? Feng Xin is too far away. I can't roll over there. But since we know these webs can be torn by teeth, I want to try to break the bindings on your wrists, Shilian explained. Muqing glared at him for a moment, then his expression swiftly cooled as he gazed upward like a dead fish looking at the sky. No thanks. I really do want to help, Shilian said helplessly. Your Highness possesses a body of 1,000 gold. I can't possibly trouble such greatness, Muqing said coldly. Feng Xin cussed. What the actual fuck? Why are you being so sarcastic at a time like this, huh? He's helping you, trying to save you, but you're acting like he owes you? Muqing's head shot up. Who asked him to help? Shilian, why do you always show up at times like these? Luck. Shilian was a little bewildered, and he vaguely remembered that Muqing had asked him the same thing a long time ago. How did he answer him back then? He couldn't remember. Is there something wrong with showing up at times like these? Muqing lay back down. Doesn't matter. I don't need your help. Why? Shilian questioned. Everyone needs help sometimes just to get by. Don't bother with him anymore, Feng Xin said. He's just a show-off. He thinks he'll lose face if he gets help from you. Muqing and Feng Xin kept at each other's throats while the wraith butterflies leisurely danced around Shilian. It was unhurried and calm as it shimmered with faint silver light. It made Shilian remember something, so he interrupted their sniping. Stop arguing, you two. It'll be more of a joke if anyone else sees you like this, and someone will be along to help us soon. No one in heaven or on earth will heed a call from this hellish place, so who's going to come save us? Muqing said derisively. Unless... A particular person came to mind before he finished, and he trailed off abruptly. Feng Xin, however, asked directly, Crimson Rain-sought Flower came with you? You trust him that much? Muqing said doubtfully. You sure he's going to come? Shilian was confident. He will come. Huachong had been behaving oddly for a while. Several times he almost suspected the Huachong next to him was fake. Nonetheless, his instincts told him that was impossible. Even if he wanted to, how would he find this cave? Muqing asked. Why don't we holler some more? Feng Xin suggested. The more people, the louder the noise. No need, Shilian said. We only need to sit and wait. No, just lie down and wait, because Huachong and I are joined by a red string. Before he even finished his sentence, he could see Feng Xin and Muqing's faces twitching like worms had crawled into their ears. What's with that look? Shilian said. don't misunderstand. I'm not talking about some frivolous notion about the red string of fate. It's a spiritual device. Just a spiritual device. Only then did they stop twitching. Oh, I see, Feng Shen replied. Mu Qing was doubtful. What kind of spiritual device? What does it do? It's quite useful, Xilian said. It's a red string tied on both our hands that invisibly connects the two of us. And one can use it to find the other. It will never break as long as one of us is still breathing. The others couldn't listen anymore and cut him off. How is that any different from a red string of fate? It's exactly the same thing. Xilian was taken aback. No, I don't think so. It's different. And just how is it different? It's exactly the same thing, all right? Mu Qing exclaimed. Xilian pondered the matter only to discover that it was true. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the intent and function of the spiritual device really was quite similar to a red string of fate. Okay, I feel less bad about spotting Feng Shen and Mu Qing now. Now that Xilian's over here like, wow, the red string that keeps me tethered to Huachang is kind of like the red string of fate that would keep me tied to Huachang if we had it. Just when he began to think he should drop this train of thought, a voice came from above. Gaga, are you down there? The moment he heard that voice, Xilian instantly felt himself relax. He looked up. Senlong, I'm down here. Then he turned to the other two in the pit. See? I told you he'd come. Feng Shen and Mu Qing both made complicated expressions when they saw how happy he looked. Huachang didn't peek his head over the edge, but all of them could hear the helpless way he spoke. Gaga, I said not to run off. Now what should we do? Xilian was confused by his tone, and his delight faltered. Huh? Is this silk webbing that difficult to deal with? Can't a Ming slash through it? The silk isn't the difficult part. He thought he heard Huachang mutter faintly, but the words were so quiet he wasn't sure they were actually said. A moment later, Huachang quietly spoke. Ming's not in a good state right now. No. Ming is my son, somehow. And nothing bad ever happens to him ever. He is always happy. Except when he's bawling like a baby, because he's sad for some reason. But then we make him feel better, and everything's fine. You know? He's fine. It's fine. Also, you know, it reflects the state of Huachang, and that just makes me nervous. Xilian found this strange. Wasn't Ming perfectly fine and completely energetic just a little while ago? How could there be something wrong with it now? Next to him, Mu Qing humped. No need to ask him anymore. How could the scimitar Ming be in a bad state? He's clearly looking for an excuse not to help. Don't say that, Xilian countered. Xilian thought it was more likely that Ming was being disciplined and Huachang wasn't allowing it out. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed above, and a figure dressed in red landed soundlessly at Xilian's side. Huachang leaned down to hold Xilian's hand. Okay. Senlong, why did you jump down too? Xilian cried when he realized who it was. Watch out for the spider silk! Sure enough, the white silk tendrils were flying at him in an attack, but Huachang didn't even spare them a glance. He gave a casual wave, and hundreds of silver butterflies shielded his back, forming armor with their wings. They started ruthlessly fighting the silk tendrils. Huachang tore away the white silk that bound Xilian, then held him around the waist and shook out a red umbrella with his free hand. Let's go. Does he always have to be on his hot boy shit? Always. Relentlessly. Consistently. Just forever and always. The other two were dumbfounded when they saw that he had zero intention of saving them. Did you forget something? Xilian hadn't yet spoken, but Huachang looked back. Oh, that's right. The heavily bound Feng Shen flew straight into Huachang's hand, and he passed the sword to Xilian. Gaga, your sword. That was what he forgot. Feng Xin and Mu Qing both cried, "Hey!" Hua Chong hugged Shilian closer and flung out his arm to open the red umbrella. "Gaga, hold on tight to me. Jesus." With that, the umbrella started flying upward, taking the pair along with it. Shilian hugged him tightly as instructed, and the other two began to scream again in earnest when they were about 6 meters off the ground. Shilian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hang on, I gotta throw away a tea bag so I'm able to drink. Easier. Everybody do a shot. I haven't forgotten you. He sent Roye out from his wrist, which wrapped itself along the two giant cocoons a few times, and began to drag them along behind the umbrella. When they were halfway out of the pit, Feng Xin cried, Wait, I left something behind." "What is it?" Shilian called back from above. "A sword," Feng Xin shouted. It fell into the corner. Shilian looked down, and sure enough, a sword's hilt was barely visible in all that white silk. He made Roye stretch out further to wrap the sword, and he pulled them all out together. Finally, all four made it back onto solid ground. Roye threw the two thick cocoons to the ground and hurriedly wrapped itself back onto Shilian's wrist, trembling slightly. It almost seemed like it was terrified of the white silk webs, which were so much like itself, but so aggressive and evil. Shilian soothed Roye while cutting the webbing on the cocoons with Feng Xin. The moment Feng Xin and Mu Qing could move, they both leapt to their feet and ripped off the rest of the webbing. Shilian held out the sword Roye had helped bring along toward Feng Xin. Finally getting a good look at the blade, he stared at it in amazement. "This is Hongjing? Feng, did your general repair that sword?" It was an offhand comment, but the moment the words left his lips, he realized how bad it sounded. Feng Xin and Mu Qing were still in the forms of Feng and Fu Yao, and Shilian had forgotten that their identities had been exposed and was still subconsciously going along with their act. Although he'd intended to be considerate, that consideration simply led to awkwardness. The two of them fell into a strange silence. Feng Xin couldn't mask his expression. Discomfort surfaced on his face. He transformed back to his true form and took the sword. "Yes, it's fixed. There are plenty of ghosts on Mount Tonglu after all. Flashing it around makes things easier." Shilian took a peek at the one who shattered Hongjing, who was standing right beside him. He cleared his throat softly. "Sorry for the trouble." After all, it wasn't easy to repair a sword that had been shattered to pieces. Mu Qing also transformed back to his true form and brushed off the rest of the silk webbing on his sleeves. "It's good that it's fixed. So many of the nefarious creatures here are adept at disguise. If someone's not good at using their brain, using Hongjing is the only way they'll see through deception." Feng Xin was pissed. "Who are you calling brainless so passive-aggressively? Did you think I wouldn't notice?" And there they went again. Shilian shook his head and turned to Hua Chong. "Senlong, I ran off too quickly before. Sorry for leaving you behind." Hua Chong tucked the umbrella away. "Don't worry. As long as Gaga doesn't run off like that again." Shilian grinned, but just as he was about to speak, he saw that Mu Qing's glance at Hua Chong had turned into a strange, pointed stare. "Mu Qing, what is it?" Mu Qing immediately snapped out of it and gave him a look. "Nothing. I've just never seen crimson rainsalt flower like this and found it curious, that's all." Shilian couldn't fully believe his explanation. While this likely was the first time Mu Qing had seen Hua Chong's true form, he'd certainly seen Hua Chong in his youthful body, and the two skins weren't remarkably different, so why that look? The four left the cave, but after only a few steps, Feng Xin asked in astonishment, "What is this place?" Mu Qing was also stunned. What happened here? They had been trapped at the bottom of the silk webbing pit, so they hadn't had a chance to investigate the situation outside. They were astonished at the sight of innumerable unique divine statues, filling cave after cave, and shocked to learn that there was such a mysterious place and such uncanny craftsmanship beneath this great snowy mountain. This is a cave of 10,000 gods, Shilian explained. Muqing scanned their surroundings and mumbled, "Who knows how many years and how much blood and sweat it'd take to build something like this? This is honestly, He seemed at a loss for words to describe it. Shilian could understand his feelings. After all, a stone cave like this was meant for cultivation and worship of the divine. His parents had constructed caves like this for him. What heavenly official wouldn't be astounded by such a massive cave of 10,000 gods? If one of their own statues was worshipped in a place like this, it would be a huge boon to their divinity. What god is worshipped in this cave? Feng asked, confused. Why are all the faces covered? Naturally, it's to prevent future passers-by like us from seeing, Shilian replied. Now that's strange, Muqing said. They could have just smashed the statues' heads. Why go through all this trouble? Thin veils like this won't stop anyone who really wants to see. As he spoke, he walked over, intending to peel away the veil of the nearest divine statue. Shilian hadn't had the chance to stop him when there was a chilling flash. The tip of a silver blade loomed mere centimeters away from Muqing's fingers. Murderous intent made the air between them grow tense. What are you doing? Feng asked in alarm. Even with that blade so close, Muqing didn't seem scared at all. Your scimitar looks fine. Why'd you tell us that it's not in a good state? Huachong stood directly behind him and said lazily, Didn't anyone teach you not to randomly put your hands on things in other people's territory? It's not your territory, so whose justice are you upholding? Muqing countered. I just don't want to cause unnecessary trouble, Huachong said flatly. This is Mount Tonglu, after all. Who knows what could happen if the veils are removed? I can't believe there come a day when someone as arrogant as Crimson Rainsod Flower would be afraid to cause unnecessary trouble, Muqing said. He moved his hand downward to touch the statue's carved robe. The scimitar Aming followed and pointed at him once more. I'm only trying to touch the stone now, not remove the veil. Why is Crimson Rainsod Flower stopping me again? Muqing questioned. Huachong shot him a fake-looking smile. I'm preventing you from causing problems. Just relentless hot guy shit. Just relentless. What? Hello? Did I really? Where on earth? Okay. Yeah. I'm only trying to touch the stone now, not remove the veil. Why is Crimson Rainsod Flower stopping me again? Muqing questioned. Huachong shot him a fake-looking smile. I'm preventing you from causing problems. Shilian put himself between the two. Stop. It's not like we have to see which god is being worshipped here. We shouldn't stay here too long anyway, so let's just go. Don't forget that we still have a mission to accomplish. It's not like we have to see which god is being worshipped here. Yeah. Which god? Is it Shilian? Is it someone Shilian knows? Is it... We will find out. Hello. We shouldn't stay here too long anyway, so let's just go. Don't forget that we still have a mission to accomplish. Huachong stared at Muqing's hand. Since that's what Gogo wants, have him put his hand away, and I'll let it go. Muqing, back off, all right? Shilian said. Muqing glared at him. Are you nuts? Why shouldn't he back off first? What if I back off and he doesn't? Between a heavenly official and a ghost, Feng naturally chose to stand on the side of the heavenly official. At most, we'll accept both sides standing down at the same time. Huachong showed no signs of doing so. You wish. Seeing that neither side would give in, Shilian rested a hand on Muqing's arm. Muqing, drop it, he urged gently. You're the one who started this. You should be the one to let it go. All right? Can you think of it as giving me some face? I swear that if you back off, Sandlang will keep his promise. Although Mu Qing was clearly reluctant, he held the stalemate for another moment, then slowly dropped his hand. They all returned to the road. Finally, the tension relaxed, and Shilian sighed in relief. They've reached another fork in the road, and Shilian turned to Hua Cheng. Which way do you think we should go this time? Hua Cheng picked a path, seemingly at random. This way. Feng Xin and Mu Qing had been walking behind them and appeared to be at each other's throats again, but Mu Qing briefly paused their arguments. How did you decide? He asked. Why this way? The two in front turned their heads to look at them. It was random. Feng Xin frowned. How can you pick randomly? Let's not go blindly. We might tumble into another pit. Hua Cheng smiled. Even if we fall into a pit, I have ways to pull His Highness out. You can follow us if you'd like, or you can head off on your own if you prefer. To be honest, I'd rather not have to rescue you again. That was just the way Hua Cheng spoke. Even if he had a smile on his face and his words were perfectly polite, it always sounded fake. The faker his smile, the more his tongue enraged people. So much that Feng Xin knocked an arrow on his bow. Shilian knew he wouldn't actually shoot. Sorry about this, Feng Xin, but considering our current situation, it really makes no difference which way we go. Hua Cheng laughed heartily. Oh, I'm scared. Looks like I'd better stay far away from you. No, never mind. Speaks for itself. He waggled his brows at Shilian and really did put some distance between them. Shilian knew he was just trying to leave the other two behind, and he smiled as he shook his head. He was about to follow Hua Cheng, but without warning, Mu Qing reached out and pulled him to a stop. Shilian looked back, bewildered. Mu Qing, what is it? Mu Qing didn't answer. Instead, he simply shouted, now! Then he grabbed Shilian and dashed off down the other path. Excuse me? Ahead, Hua Cheng had noticed that something was wrong. He turned back to look, but Feng Xin had already punched the stone wall. Boulders rumbled and crashed down, blocking the road behind them. Mu Qing and Feng Xin rushed forward and slapped 50 or so talismans in the span of a second. Hua Cheng was now separated from the three of them by the pile of boulders. As it turned out, Feng Xin and Mu Qing hadn't been arguing when they were trailing behind them earlier. They had actually been discussing how to launch this sudden attack. Shilian was dumbfounded. What are you guys doing? He struggled free of Mu Qing's map, wanting to check on Hua Cheng behind the wall of stone. However, Feng Xin tripped him, and he and Mu Qing each grabbed one of Shilian's arms and began to drag him off at a breakneck pace. Let's get away, quick! Those talismans won't last for long, Feng Xin exclaimed. You have to ask what we're doing? There's something odd about him, can't you tell? Mu Qing reprimanded. How is he odd? Shilian questioned. You've gone really stupid. Old is written all over him. You're not the only one behind it, Mu Qing exclaimed. Stop talking and run, Feng Xin roared. Fuck, I think the wraith butterflies caught up. Whew, all of a sudden, I'm too excited, and I'm tripping over all the words in the world. I apologize. God, you'd think I wouldn't be able to knock my... There we go. Stop talking and run, Feng Xin said. Fuck, I think the wraith butterflies caught up. Block the cave entrance, Mu Qing barked. Feng Xin continued to punch the walls as they ran, and many of the cave entrances were completely blocked by the giant rocks that tumbled down. The two dragged Shilian along as they fled through the endless, winding underground corridors, sending his head spinning from all the twists and turns. Stop, Shilian shouted as they ran. When they finally felt they'd gone far enough, Feng Xin and Mu Qing paused to catch their breaths. Taking advantage of this break, Shilian said, What I meant was, why did you two suddenly drag me away? Did you notice something? Feng Shin was supporting himself with his hands on his knees and panting harshly. Let him tell you again. Mu Qing straightened up and turned to Shi Lian. It's so obvious. You didn't see it? That pearl. Do you remember that pearl? What pearl? Shi Lian asked. Mu Qing said each word slowly and carefully. The red coral pearl from the earrings of the god-pleasing martial goddess warrior costume. The one for you swore to the wrong of I literally just... The red coral pearl from the earrings of the god-pleasing martial warrior costume. The one you wore for the Shengwan heavenly ceremony. The earring you lost. Shi Lian thought for a long while, but he still couldn't remember. He looked confused as he tugged at his earlobe. Were those earrings red coral pearls? Did I lose one? The corners of Mu Qing's lips twitched, and he said furiously, You two even wrongfully accused me of stealing that pearl! How could you forget something like this? It's been 800 years, Shi Lian began, but Feng Shin interrupted to rebuke Mu Qing. Stop making shit up! No one wronged you! You're the one who started making assumptions all on your own. Shi Lian waved. Stop fighting, stop fighting. Why are you talking about that pearl out of nowhere? Because it's been found, Mu Qing exclaimed. Did you see the red bead tied in Hua Chang's hair? Shi Lian's eyes widened. Are you saying... I am, Mu Qing stated with conviction. So that was why Mu Qing had that weird look in his eyes when he looked at Hua Chang earlier. Why would he have that red coral pearl? Are you sure you remember it correctly? Shi Lian questioned. Mu Qing cut him off. I searched for that pearl nonstop for a whole year, and I've never stopped looking for it. I'm the only one who would never remember it wrong. Shi Lian crossed his arms and tucked them into his sleeves. He furrowed his brow in contemplation. I still think you might be mistaken. There's no reason for him to have that pearl. Don't all high-quality red coral pearls look pretty much the same? Besides, Senlong has always liked collecting rare treasures. He's got antiques that are thousands of years old. Mu Qing nodded. Fine, very well. You think I'm wrong? Fine. Then look at this. He was standing right next to a divine statue, and as he finished speaking, he yanked the veil off its face. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. This is it. This is it. Everybody shut up. Everybody shut up. Everybody be quiet. Nobody move. I'm almost out of tea. Why don't you take a look at this then? Surely it can't be a mistake too. The moment the veil was lifted, Shi Lian's pupils shrank. The divine statue's face wasn't deformed or frightening. It was the face of a young man who wore a gentle, kind expression, smiling and in high spirits. But when Shi Lian saw it, a chill raced down his spine and raised the hair on his neck. How could it not be eerie? His face was nearly identical to Shi Lian's own. Nearly identical, though. Is it seriously a relative? Is there going to be generations of unlucky bastards like Shi Lian? Or is it actually... Looking at this divine statue so closely was like staring into a mirror. Even that smile, previously kind, now seemed disturbing. Shi Lian couldn't help but feel shaken by the sight of it. Are you still going to tell me I'm wrong? Mu Qing said coldly. Without much effort, Shi Lian finally squeezed out, Why would one of my divine statues be here? One, Mu Qing replied. Not just one. Look closely. Then he yanked the veil from another divine statue. It too had a face that was undoubtedly Shi Lian's. He pulled the veils from the faces of 5 or 6 more divine statues. They were all identical. This certainly is a cave of 10,000 gods, Mu Qing said, but there's only one god worshipped here. Only Shi Lian. I don't have any more tea. I don't have any more fucking tea. I don't have any more tea. And this is exactly why Hua Cheng knows this place. He's the only motherfucker who would do this. Why didn't I... You know? Better late than never, right? It's fine. He was surrounded by endless copies of his own face. The only thing, although... Okay, here's my thought. Either Hua Cheng, you know, hired a bunch of people to do this, which could also be very Hua Cheng, or my guess is that he made them all, but the reason they all have varying degrees of detail and everything is because obviously if you do something 10,000 times, you're going to get better, you know, at over time, and that's why they all fucking look. I hate her. I hate her so much. So fucking much. What page did we start on? Hang on. I gotta see where we are. I gotta see what thing we're heading on. We started at 11. So then we're going to, you know, okay. We're almost done. We're almost done. Jesus. Okay. It was like Shilian had fallen into a bizarre hallucinatory dream. His mind spun for a good while before he abruptly realized something. Wait, Muqing, you didn't get a chance to see these statues' faces earlier, right? You were going to remove the veils, but he stopped you. Muqing humphed. I don't need to see the statues' faces to know that you're the subject. How would you know? Shilian asked. Muqing rolled all the silk veils into a ball and tossed them to the side, his veins popping slightly. How would I know? Because all your clothes, accessories, and daily living needs were my responsibility back then. I washed for you, I mended for you, and every item in your wardrobe was unique. These statues are too detailed. Everything is there, exactly the same, completely. When I saw those clothes, of course I knew whose face they would have. Shilian fell silent. He put a hand over his forehead and thought back on Hua Cheng's odd behavior along the way. Next to him, Feng said, he wouldn't let us look at those statues, which proves he knows exactly what's weird about them. That whole excuse about how we all dropped in by accident after the avalanche was bullshit. He must know what this place is. Not just that, I bet he was the one who threw us into that pit of silk webbing, Muqing added. He was serious about killing us. But why are these statues like this? Shilian wondered. The statues had all been carved with such precision that they seemed nearly alive. The details were more than detailed, almost to the point of being frightening. It was clear to see just how closely the sculptor had observed their subject. Shilian didn't think even the work of Shanlei's most renowned sculptors had reached this level of detail. It was as if the sculptor's mind was filled by Shilian and Shilian alone, as if he saw nothing else. You're so close to cluing in. Shilian, you're so close. You're right there, man. The three of them were surrounded by countless statues that all bore the same face, and Feng shuddered violently. Honestly, what the fuck? It's too creepy. They're too fucking realistic. And there were so many. I suspect these statues are components for some wicked spell. Let's destroy them, Mu Qing said. He moved to shatter one with the chop of his hand. Shi Lian's mind was instantly pulled back to the present. He stopped him. Don't! He cried. Mu Qing looked at him. Are you sure? The spell could be aimed at you. Shi Lian pondered it, but in the end still said, let's not act recklessly. I think the chance that it's a wicked spell is very small. I think it's very large, Feng said. Honestly, what the fuck? Doesn't the sight of these things scare you? Mu Qing stared at Shi Lian, who stared at him right back. And what are you basing that off of? Nothing, Shi Lian said, but these divine statues are quite nice and very meticulously sculpted. If we destroy them before we find out about them, we might regret it. After a pause, he added, Sanlang might have lied to me about something, but I truly don't think it's anything that would harm me. Mu Qing couldn't believe his ears. Did he cast some spell on you to bewitch your mind? You could fucking call it that, yeah. I think if he wrote suspicious on his face, you'd suddenly forget how to read. That's it. That's it. That's the line of the day. That's the line of dialogue for the day. That's it. He wins. He wins. While they were talking, Feng snapped to alertness, like he was about to face a dangerous foe. Watch out, he cried. Shi Lian and Mu Qing both tensed and demanded, what is it? That spider silk is coming at us again, Feng exclaimed. The palm torch illuminated the stone walls ahead. They were covered with large patches of dense white silk. The three cursed mentally, gearing themselves up for another clash. Yet unexpectedly, this white silk wasn't as aggressive as the silk in the pit. It neither moved nor attacked. It was acting like a gecko lounging on a wall. After they had waited for a while, Shi Lian observed, these silk nets don't seem alive. If they're not alive, then what are they for? Feng questioned. Shi Lian had an answer in mind, which he confirmed when he went over to study it. I think they're covering something. Oh, Jesus. All three of them stood before the stone wall. Shi Lian gave the white silk a tug and pulled off a large section. As expected, the strands were tough and difficult to tear down, but he could manage it with effort. The veils had concealed the identity of those divine statues, so what was being hidden on these stone walls? The other two joined him in tearing down the webs, each taking care of different areas. Soon a section of the wall was revealed on Shi Lian's side. It's a mural! The webs had been hiding a giant painting. The entire surface of the wall was densely packed with lines, colors, and little people. The mural was divided into smaller pieces, each with a different style. Some were coarse and wild, some elegant, some exquisite, some peculiar. After studying it for a while, Shi Lian stated, he painted this. He? Mu Qing echoed. Huacheng, are you sure? Yes, Shi Lian said softly. There are words on here, and he's the one who wrote them. Of course, because you taught him how to... She just set up all these to all culminate in the ways that they decode these exact moments. She's fucking unhinged. She's a psychopath. He pointed at a little blood-red person on the wall. Right next to it, there were a bunch of messy, twisted, indiscernible characters. It looked like they had been written in a state of delirium or scrawled to vent the author's feelings during a period of extreme suffering. Based on those characters, Shi Lian could guess that the little blood-red person painted there was Huacheng himself, but for some unknown reason he had depicted himself as extremely ugly and disfigured. You're right there, babe. Feng glanced at it and couldn't help but comment, that handwriting, it's so ugly, I've gone blind. Okay, Feng coming in on number 2 with dialogue. I bet even I write better than him. Handwriting uglier than Feng was truly beyond saving. Shi Lian was dazzled. There was so much to see that he didn't even know where to start looking. Now that he'd confirmed this was Hua Cheng's work, it was like he had discovered a treasure trove. His fingertips began to tremble slightly. Mu Qing seemed to have discovered something nearby and called out, "Your Highness, come quick! Come and see!" Only then did Shi Lian snap out of it. "What is it? What is it now, you mean?" Feng Shen and Mu Qing were already rendered speechless and could only point at one of the images. This piece was considerably larger than the other ones depicted. Right at its center was a tall tower connected to a city wall. Below, a sea of people surrounded a magnificent stage. The lines were simple, yet they captured the scene perfectly with only a few strokes. Mu Qing pointed at the center of the mural. "So that was him?" he said with a trembling voice. Shi Lian was also staring at that section. This piece was mostly colorless. Only 2 figures had been colored within it. There was a small figure at the bottom that had been painted pure white. It seemed to be glowing. The figure was looking toward the sky with hands outstretched. It was about to catch another little figure who was falling from the tower. That little figure was bloody red. "Is that him? Was that him?" Mu Qing murmured. "The little kid who fell during the Shuanghuan Heavenly Ceremonial Parade. But how is that possible? I can't believe it. Crimson Rays of Flower was him?" Feng Shen, wait, is this fucking happening? Wait, is this happening? Is this happening? Like now? This is happening now. Feng Shen patted Shi Lian and Mu Qing madly and pointed to one side. "There's more in the back." Shi Lian walked over to the other mural and saw that it depicted a dilapidated little shrine. Upon the shrine's altar there was a divine statue, which also glowed faintly with white light. It held a sword in one hand, and in the other it offered a red umbrella downward. There was an ugly little blood-red figure at the bottom of the mural. It cupped a small flower in its hands, which it was offering to the statue. Shi Lian felt a sudden headache coming on. His hand flew to clutch his throbbing temple, but he didn't look away. The next mural depicted a battlefield. Large bands of soldiers were gearing up for war, and a little white figure floated in the sky overhead. It wielded a long sword in one hand and looked mighty and glorious. There was another little blood-red figure among the dense battalion below. Its head was raised to watch the one in the sky. Why is that going to be the one that does it? Shi Lian was absorbed in these paintings when Feng Shen's disbelieving voice rang out. "That red one. It's all the same person, isn't it? It's all him. They're all Hua Cheng? Holy fuck, he's been following you all this time?" Mu Qing also looked incredulous. He wasn't just following. He was watching. Watching very closely. Very, very closely. He was everywhere. "Look, this is the main street, Buyou Forest. What's this, Beiji Hill? My God, was he the one who carved all these divine statues?" Looking at the murals was giving Feng Shen chills. My fucking God, who the hell is he? He's had his eye on you since 800 years ago, and he's still following you, even now? What the fuck? This is terrifying. Is he bewitched? What the hell does he want? No normal devotee would go this far, so just what the hell does he want? "There must be some plot. There must be," Mu Qing exclaimed. "Let's keep looking. I'm sure we'll find a clue." Shi Lian was completely stricken. He stared at that little blood-red figure on the wall, unable to wrap his mind around it. It felt like countless memories were fighting to rush into his brain. He hadn't forgotten, but they'd never taken root. They were pouring in so fast that his breath could barely keep up anymore. Just then, Shi Lian heard the other two yell, and he snapped out of it. "What is it now?" he asked. Feng Shen and Mu Qing were both standing before a stone wall, and it looked like they had seen something outrageous. When they saw Shi Lian walk toward them, Feng Shen quickly turned around and stopped him, pushing him away. "Holy fuck, don't look!" "What?" Shi Lian was bewildered. "What was it? Why can't I look?" Mu Qing's expression was dark. "Just don't bother. There's nothing worth seeing here. Let's get out of here as soon as possible." The two of them each grabbed one of Shi Lian's arms and started to bolt once more. Shi Lian complained as he was dragged along. "What are you doing? I wasn't done looking at the murals." "There's no need to look anymore. Things like that shouldn't be seen," Feng Shen yelled angrily as he ran. "My fucking God, I've never witnessed anything like that in my fucking life, nor anyone like him." Shilian was baffled. What have you never witnessed? What's wrong with Sen Lung? Why are you still calling him Sen Lung? Stop it, Muqing admonished. You can't get away from him fast enough. Never go near him again. He's not normal. He's sick in the head. He's crazy. Shilian couldn't listen anymore. Why are you two insulting him like this? None of us are all that normal, you know. Stop asking, Feng cried. You don't understand. He's not like us. He's crazy. Toward me, he what? Shilian demanded. Please let me go. Let me go back and see for myself, all right? If we found the not safe for work section of this altar, I'm going to eat my microphone. That's just what's gonna happen. I'm going to dismantle it piece by piece and fucking eat my microphone. Where the shit was I? Okay. One wanted to go back, but the other two were pulling him forward. They were stuck in that stalemate until suddenly a bone-chilling voice came from ahead of them. Shit, we're not gonna find out if there's the not safe for work section. Didn't I say not to randomly put your hands on things in other people's territory? Okay, maybe Huachong wins dialogue of the day. The three of them froze, then slowly turned to look. Before them stood a man dressed in red. Huachong was leaning against the stone wall, blocking their way with a smile. If you do, who knows what will happen? While his mouth was smiling, his eye held not a trace of mirth, but was instead dark and muddied. He hugged one of his arms, while his other hand idly fiddled with something small. It was the deep red coral pearl tied to his thin braid. The coral's luminous red luster was as bright and dazzling as the red affinity knot on his pale finger. Neither the hundreds of charmed talismans nor the heavy piles of boulders had stopped him. Fengshen and Muqing both reacted swiftly. Fengshen shot a barrage of arrows as Muqing swung his saber to send an air blade strike toward Huachong, then grabbed Shilian and ran. Fengshen employed his same old trick and struck wildly at the rock walls. What the fuck? He cried. How did he find us so fast? How should I know? Muqing yelled back. Wait, the red string, the red string! His finger is still tied with that red string. When it dawned on them, they both turned around to see Shilian's hand, as if he would let them. Shilian clutched the red knot on his finger to protect it and exclaimed, You can't! Your Highness, he'll find us as long as you keep that red string tied to you, Fengshen insisted. If you don't want him to catch up, it has to be removed. Well, that's the question, isn't it? Shilian still held on, guarding his finger. I'm not afraid of him catching up. I want to ask him about this face to face. Muqing's eyes widened. You still want to talk to him? I don't think you'll realize how dangerous he is until he's devoured you whole. But I already know he's dangerous, Shilian countered. You guys won't tell me what that mural shows, and you won't let me go near him. You won't convince me of anything acting like this. He's a ghost king, and his behavior is abnormal. People would usually stay far away based on that alone. You shouldn't need to be convinced of anything. Shilian raised two fingers. Two choices. Either you let me go back and ask him to explain, or you let me go back to look at that mural. Fengshen and Muqing seemed to remember something terrifying. One's lips began to twitch, while the other's brow could not furrow any deeper. They both stood blocking him and yelled in unison, We'll allow neither! Thus, Shilian rolled up his sleeves. Well, since you both said no, let's solve this with our fists. Who's first, or will you come at me together? Muqing turned to Fengshen. You first. Then he backed away to the side of the tunnel. Fengshen didn't seem confident that he could win against Shilian, but he was determined to give it his best shot to rescue this wayward youth. He gripped his bow. Very well, Your Highness, pardon my insolence. Before Shilian could even return the opening courtesy, he felt something hot being stuck to his back. Someone behind him shouted, Stay still, don't talk, and he was rendered as stiff as an iron board. And not just his body, he also couldn't move his mouth to speak. Mu Qing darted out from behind Xilian. Let's drag him away. That talisman will paralyze him temporarily, but it won't last long, he said to Feng Shen. Feng Shen was slightly dumbfounded. Why did you ambush him? Didn't we agree to go one-on-one? Xilian was shocked as well that Mu Qing would immediately go back on his word. He wouldn't have been deceived so easily had it not been for his wholehearted trust in both of his once subordinates. Who has the time for you to go one-on-one right now? Mu Qing said. He's doing it on purpose. It's easy to see that he's dragging things out to give Hua Cheng time to catch up. Do you see the state he's in right now? Completely enchanted. No matter what you tell him, nothing will get through. Once they meet, Hua Cheng will probably only need to charm him with a few lies, and he'll believe him, just like someone who's under a fox spirit's thrall. Fox spirit's thrall has a footnote. It says fox spirits in Asian folk tales are seducers who bewitch humans into falling helplessly in love with them. Feng Shen considered this and decided that what Mu Qing said made some sense. Your Highness, he sighed, we didn't intend to deceive you, but his behavior toward you is really unseemly. I can't even speak of it. Please just come with us. Let's go, Mu Qing said. Mu Qing's words weren't a suggestion or a plea, they were a command. He must have stuck a command talisman on Xilian's back, drawn in his own blood. A command talisman could ostensibly make its target obey the spellcaster's every whim, but in reality it could only realize simple commands like do not speak, walk, stop, run, and so on. More complicated commands were harder to execute, and the talisman couldn't confound the target's mind. Only powerful ghosts like the Brocade Immortal could manage such things. The two hurried along with Xilian in tow again, but they were stopped by a pile of rubble blocking the way. Feng Shen saw that their path had been cut off and wondered aloud, why are the rocks blocking the way? We can't go any farther. Weren't you the one who knocked them down? Why are you asking me? Mu Qing said. You were the one leading the way, so you're the one who messed up. Why are we somewhere we've already been anyway? Why would you circle back around? Feng Shen questioned. Mu Qing refused to be questioned. What a joke. I don't know the roads here, so how could I possibly lead? Haven't we been running around randomly all this time? Sensing they were about to get into another argument, Feng Shen waved it off. Never mind, it's not worth wasting my breath on you. Let's just dig through this. Hua Cheng was pursuing them from behind, so they could only go forward. Retreat wasn't an option if they wanted to avoid running into him. Blocking roads was easy, but digging through that blockage was much harder. They made Xilian stand obediently in a corner while Feng Shen rained down random punches on the boulders, and Mu Qing, with bulging veins, swung his mighty Zhenme Dao to shatter the rocks. They cleared the path in no time. Rubble rolled and dust clouded the air, but just as they were about to call Xilian over, they saw a red-clad figure standing in the now open passage amidst the clouds of settling dust. Xilian's eyes instantly lit up. It was Hua Cheng. The Ghost King's gaze was cold. He stood silently with his hands clasped behind his back. Why won't you go away? Feng Shen blurted. Honey, he ain't gone away for 800 years. What makes you think he's gonna go away now? Where the fuck am I? Not on that page. That's where I am. This man was the very definition of persistence. They had left him in the dust, so how had he managed to appear ahead of them? How long had he been standing there, waiting in silence as they cleared away the obstacle blocking their way to deliver themselves right into his hands? He was frighteningly tenacious and sinister. Feng Shen and Mu Qing quickly backed away, putting some distance between them. Hua Cheng didn't look at them. His gaze moved to the side of the tunnel, and he took a step in Xilian's direction. Feng Shen and Mu Qing realized why he was here, and rushed to Xilian's side in a flash to guard him. Don't come any closer, they both shouted at once. Hua Cheng's expression turned extremely dark. Normally, if someone dared to tell Crimson Rainsought Flower to stay away, he wouldn't give a damn. He'd simply laugh and approach anyway. But at that moment, he seemed genuinely wary, not daring to move recklessly. He paused in his step. After a moment, he finally spoke. His words came slowly, and his tone was calm. What do you two mean by this? Feng Shen, however, cut straight to the point. You don't need to pretend anymore. We know this is your old lair. We've already seen what those divine statues are, and the murals, too. We've seen everything. Hua Chong wasn't directly facing them. He stood at an angle. The hands tucked behind his back seemed to jerk at Feng Shin's words, and two of his fingers curled stiffly inward. His Highness saw it too? He asked softly, inclining his head. His voice was very, very quiet. While he still sounded unfazed, his voice was slightly cracked and obviously strange. No, Shilian cried mentally. The truth was that he hadn't seen much, but at that moment Shilian could neither move nor speak. He could only lean dutifully against the wall in the corner, which made it look like he was hiding behind the other two. It must have seemed like he was afraid to face Hua Chong and refused to speak with him. Feng Shin drew his bow. That's right, we now understand your intentions. I swear to God, if that wasn't the not safe for work section of the murals. I'm telling you. I'm fucking telling you. I know it. I feel it. I feel it in my queer bones. Where the fuck did I leave off? Now is not the time to lose my place. With respect for your position as a Ghost King, if you still know self-respect and conduct yourself with any dignity, we ask that you don't come near His Highness again. Shilian's feelings were like a cottage on fire, black smoke roiling heavy and thick. Hua Chong should have noticed that something was amiss, and Shilian could only hope that he would question him directly to find out what was wrong. But Hua Chong's current state seemed to render him unable to notice a thing. Don't go near him, he said coldly. What right do either of you have to say that to me? Not waiting for their response, Hua Chong's eye flashed dangerously. But you've reminded me that we have unfinished business to settle. The moment he finished speaking, countless shrieking silver butterflies shot forth toward them. In the face of such an attack, a spiritual shield was the only option. Feng Shin and Mu Qing cried in unison, "Shield!" The butterfly deluge was blocked by the formless spiritual shield and shattered into shimmering silver light, which rapidly recrystallized into new silver butterflies and attacked once more. The onslaught was completely unstoppable. Feng Shin and Mu Qing gave ground slowly as they kept their shield up, and Hua Chong steadily advanced, step by step. The whirling winds raised by his spiritual aura stirred his raven hair, and it danced wildly with every gust. The mad fury and violence in his eyes was on full display under the blinding light of the silver butterflies. Defending alone wouldn't get them anywhere. Feng Shin and Mu Qing exchanged a look, silently agreeing to go on the attack. They maintained the spiritual shield as they charged forward. Then, with weapons flashing, the three began to fight in the narrow stone corridor. Feng Shin battled the wraith butterflies while Mu Qing faced Hua Chong. Hua Chong flung out an arm, and the scimitar Aming appeared in his left hand, ready to strike. This was the first time Shilian witnessed Aming fighting seriously. The scimitar was long, slender, and chillingly murderous, and it gleamed with threatening silver light. It was truly a wicked blade, overflowing with evil. The battle was truly thrilling to behold. Hua Chong stood his ground even when fighting 2 against 1, and Shilian watched unblinkingly with bated breath. With a flick of Aming's blade, Mu Qing's God damn it, was knocked off course and into the rocks. Although Mu Qing still had a grip on the hilt, the blade was stuck. He couldn't yank his weapon out. This only shocked Mu Qing for a moment, but Hua Chong's fist was already swinging right into his jaw. The punch sent Mu Qing flying through the air, and he finally lost his grip on his saber's hilt. Meanwhile, each arrow Feng Shin shot at the butterflies was snapped by their sharp wings. The sheer number of butterflies was ultimately too difficult to deal with. At this point, both victory and defeat were a foregone conclusion. Countless white silk tendrils slithered from the corners of the corridor and wrapped Feng Shin and Mu Qing into giant cocoons once more. The more they struggled, the tighter their bindings became. Mu Qing tore at the silk as he yelled, "I knew you were the one who threw us into that pit." "This isn't spider silk," Feng Shin exclaimed. "This is..." It dawned on Shilian as well. It was butterfly silk. Hang on. I need a moment with that one. Butterflies emerged from chrysalises, which they wove from their own silk. This strange white silk was completely of Huachang's making, and it was probably linked to his aggressive wraith butterflies. With the match decided, Huachang sheathed his scimitar. I threw you in to save you from disaster. Otherwise, you would have never had a chance to find this cave of 10,000 gods, he jeered. And it was your yelling that caused the avalanche. Why don't you thank me for saving your puny little lives? Huachang had probably planned to wait out the avalanche at first, getting Shilian out once the snowy mountain quieted down, and leaving Feng and Muqing behind. But unexpectedly, the pair had gnawed through the chrysalises and made enough noise that Shilian had discovered them, which led to all the trouble afterward. If not for all that, Shilian might have really just followed Huachang straight out, without looking at a single divine statue. But the worst-case scenario had come to pass. Every secret had been torn out and exposed under the sun. Despite the anxiety roiling under the surface, Shilian's body still sat obediently in place. Huachang's gaze was growing colder and more intense as he stared condescendingly down at Muqing. It seems I'm the one with the real talent for sabers, not you, he quietly stated. Muqing's throat was bound by a few bands of white silk, and his face changed from blue to red and back as he was strangled. Blood leaked from the corners of his lips, and he choked out, You, I see, I get it. Oh God, what now? What the fuck now? Feng Xing gritted out through his teeth. What do you get? I get why this bastard hates me so much now, Muqing said. He probably hates you for the same reason. Why? Feng Xin demanded through his coughs. Because he's insane, Muqing said hatefully through his own coughing. Have you forgotten what was in those murals? He was that young soldier His Highness wanted to promote after he returned from Beiji Hill. His Highness had said his swordplay was good and that he was well suited to the saber. Why'd that make him hate you? Feng Xin questioned. Muqing didn't reply. Huachang landed another punch on Muqing's face. Huachang gave a chilling smile and answered on Muqing's behalf. Because he kicked me out of the army. To think Muqing had done something like that. Feng Xin was astonished. What the fuck? Why'd you do that? How'd he piss you off? Muqing's face was covered in blood. I just made him go home. It's not like it's good to fight in a war. How could I have known he'd wind up being this crazy and holding grudges all this time? Huachang cut him off with another punch, so forceful that Muqing's face almost contorted when it landed. Huachang smiled. Did you think I couldn't guess why you kicked me out? Muqing looked away and Huachang snickered. I guess it's clear which one of us is actually useless trash, Muqing spat out a mouthful of blood and grimaced like he'd been stabbed where it hurt. He replied spitefully, slowly. Thank goodness I kicked you out. If we'd kept you in the army and let you get closer to His Highness, were you going to watch him all day with your mind full of unspeakable filth? Disgusting. Shilian's heart squeezed violently. Huachang had his fist raised at first, but it froze in midair when Muqing spat the word disgusting. Veins bulged on the back of his pale hand. The fingers clenched and loosened, then clenched. A long moment later, Huachang said icily, For now, I won't argue with you on that point. Ooh. But tell me one thing, and tell me honestly. Your argument before the avalanche, is that true? Oh, motherfucker, what was the argument? Yeah, before his face went, what was that? Muqing looked to Feng Xin with eyes wide. Feng Xin looked back, his own eyes round and bulging. Neither of them knew how to respond. My patience is limited, Huachang said sharply. Answer me on the count of 3. 1, 2. Such a rush for an answer. An idea struck Mu Qing within his panic. "Your Highness, run!" he cried. The moment the command was issued, the damned spell stuck to Shi Lian's back forced him to bolt. Hua Chong swung around toward him, and 2 bands of white butterfly silk shot from the corners of the cave to bind Shi Lian. He fell to the ground before he'd even managed 2 steps. To an observer, it looked like Shi Lian had been frozen in terror this whole time, or perhaps that he'd been struggling to accept the truth about Hua Chong, or had simply decided he didn't want to intervene in their fight. Now it looked like he'd finally decided to flee, but had failed. The truth was, though, he had never even considered running away. I have a comment about that, but now's not the time. Shi Lian's hands and feet were tightly bound by the thick white silk. He lay sprawled on the ground with his black hair and white sleeves splayed out around him. His bamboo hat had rolled off to one side. Hua Chong slowly turned to him, paused for a long moment, and then made his way to Shi Lian's side. He'd only taken a few steps before Feng Shen could no longer hold back a desperate shout. "Hua Chong!" Hua Chong paused in his step and tilted his head. Let His Highness go," Feng Shen forced out a plea. "He's suffered enough. Don't—" To him. Hua Chong didn't reply. He came to Shi Lian's side and, with one hand on his back and one hand under his knees, swept him into his arms. Shi Lian lay against Hua Chong's chest. Even though they were sealed in those giant white chrysalises, he could see Feng Shen and Mu Qing's expressions. Feng Shen looked like he was watching a lamb entering a tiger's mouth, as if Shi Lian was going to be ripped apart and devoured, and he started yelling. Mu Qing had started tearing at the white silk with his teeth again, but the awkward angle meant his struggles came to nothing. Hua Chong knew the pathways of this cave of 10,000 gods like the back of his hand. After many forks and turns, the 2 figures and their voices soon disappeared. Carrying Shi Lian in his arms, Hua Chong moved deeper into the darkness of the cave's innermost dens. One moment, please. I can't even turn a page. Oh my God, come on. Seriously? Oh, you're kidding. You're kidding. You're so kidding. That's way too long. Okay. This is definitely a shift, because Hua Chong is now like officially like taken him away. So, but like now would be kind of a great time, because it's the shift from because he's finally gotten. Yeah, I can't form sentences right now, but they're alone now, right? A little more as in like a couple of pages. I keep drinking from that has no... Okay. All right. Holy shit, it's 5:30. Okay, literally just a couple of pages. Right. Hang on. The only light around them. The only light around them came from the gently fluttering silver wraith butterflies. Shi Lian couldn't see the expression on Hua Chong's face, but he could feel the tension in his body. Hua Chong had held him like this in the past, but it was obvious that something had changed. He wouldn't even touch Shi Lian's neck or hands directly. Shi Lian kept eyeing Hua Chong's face, trying to blink hard enough that he'd notice, but Hua Chong kept avoiding his gaze. Hua Chong took him into a chamber with a stone bed, where he quickly brought him and set him down. As he lay Shi Lian on the bed, he noticed something and checked Shi Lian's back.
They cast a spell on you. Shi Lian was overjoyed. He'd finally discovered it. Still, it had taken him incredibly long to notice that there was something off about Shi Lian, which just showed how badly Hua Chang had been caught off guard. Shi Lian waited for him to remove the command talisman from his back, but Hua Chang's hand paused before he touched the offending paper. In the end, Hua Chang withdrew his hand and laid Shi Lian flat on the bed. Don't worry, Your Highness. I won't kill those two useless pieces of trash. For now, Hua Chang said in a low voice, perhaps attempting to reassure Shi Lian, even though I'd really like to murder them. There was a layer of thick, soft, fresh hay on the stone bed. It didn't jab Shi Lian at all as he lay there limply, but he was so anxious that his insides were smoking. He couldn't understand why Hua Chang wouldn't release him from the spell. Just as he was trying desperately to struggle his way out of its control, Hua Chang reached for the sash around Shi Lian's waist and began to untie it. Fucking excuse me? In an unfortunate coincidence, that was the moment when the command talisman on Shi Lian's back started to fade. He kicked out hard with one leg as an "ah" escaped his lips. His spasm looked like nothing more than the jerk of a dying fish twitching in its last attempt at life. And objecting with no real power. Still, Hua Chang froze instantly and withdrew his hand. I won't. At that point, Hua Chang seemed to decide that his tone was too harsh, and that his actions might be scaring or repulsing Shi Lian. He backed away a few steps and softened his voice. His expression was cautious and resigned, but otherwise unreadable. Your Highness, I won't do anything to you, he said in a low voice. Don't be scared. Shi Lian finally understood. Hua Chang still wasn't sure what kind of response he would receive from Shi Lian upon releasing the spell, so he was refusing to hear it altogether. Yeah. Hua Chang seemed to be holding back some sort of urge, and he once again assured him in a quiet tone that sounded like a vow. Your Highness, trust me. He'd said that exact phrase before, but this time all his normal confidence was gone. Motherfucking, why don't I have three hands? Okay. Yeah. Alright. Shi Lian wanted to answer him, but couldn't, and he didn't dare struggle anymore, lest Hua Chang's misunderstanding deepen. He could only lie there, flat and motionless, waiting patiently for the power of the command talisman to fade entirely. Seeing that Shi Lian had stopped resisting, Hua Chang approached again, reached out, and gingerly finished untying Shi Lian's belt. Senlang, Shi Lian called out in his mind. Shi Lian wholeheartedly believed that Hua Chang would never take advantage of a helpless person, but this new development was completely unexpected. He couldn't help his eyes widening. Hua Chang set about loosening Shi Lian's clothes, but he seemed to avoid touching Shi Lian's body, which slowed him down. It was a long while before Shi Lian's outer robes were removed and the inner robe followed. A wraith butterfly perched on the curve of Shi Lian's shoulder, and a warm, tingling feeling crawled over his skin. It was only then that Shi Lian realized the state he was in. His skin was red and slightly swollen, even cracked in some areas, but when the silver butterfly perched on him, his injuries had started to heal. This was frostbite he'd gotten from tumbling all over the frozen mountain, but Shi Lian hadn't noticed it since he was fairly used to pain at this point. If he had frostbite, then he had frostbite. Even if he had noticed the injuries earlier, he probably would have left them to heal on their own. But Hua Chang knew even better than Shi Lian himself where he was hurt, and he wouldn't let it go. He would address Shi Lian's injuries no matter what. Shi Lian's thoughts were interrupted when Hua Chang took his arm and raised it. There were even more patches of frostbite on his hands and feet, and many of the spots were bleeding due to all the frantic running and pulling he'd been subjected to recently. Shi Lian wasn't afraid of pain, but he was ticklish. And in spite of himself, fragmented memories from years past surfaced in his mind. The trembling, heated hands of a boy in a dark cave. Random panicked touches, irregular breathing, and racing hearts. At first, these memories were hazy and incredibly faint. Shilian had packed them away and tossed them into a corner of his mind long ago, but as the memories began to resurface, they had a surprisingly different taste, and it made Shilian want to hold his head and scream, especially with Hua Chang right in front of him doing very nearly the same things he'd done once upon a time. Shilian's face and mind were burning. He was afraid Hua Chang would see his distress, but Hua Chang didn't look at him at all. He fulfilled his promise completely and never crossed the line. He kept his head slightly turned away, averting his gaze from Shilian's half-exposed white shoulder. Suddenly, a jeering voice rang out from behind Hua Chang. God damn, where the fuck? Hua Chang, you madman, what do you think you're doing to His Highness? You're disgusting. Hua Chang whipped his head toward the voice. Shilian looked past him to see who had reached the entrance of the cavern chamber. The speaker was Mu Cheng, with Feng Shen beside him. Despite being so recently wrapped in giant chrysalises, they had somehow broken free and found this place. Their faces had gone pale at the scene inside the cavern, and Shilian's face paled in turn. What an awful sight. Well, this is where we're going to have to stop. I don't know. I don't know what you want from me. I don't know what to tell you. The comment about a little while ago, after there was something about how Shilian didn't want to fight or get away or anything like that. He absolutely did not want to. It brings up a very interesting question, which is like, even if someone has, essentially created a very, very detailed and thorough altar to you, and has displayed such an overwhelming amount of attention to detail and devotion and closeness over such a long period of time in which you were pretty much unaware. It's interesting because if it doesn't, it's hard to quantify. It's basically like if Shilian's not freaked out about it, then he's not freaked out about it. I don't know what to. Like, it's like, that's just, his, like, of course he had every right to be freaked out about it, and of course he still has, like, questions, but he's not, like, fundamentally freaked out about it, in which case this would be a very different story, right? This is where the story would take a very different turn, but it doesn't immediately go there because Shilian, for whatever weird, gray, kind of fucked up reason, which is surprising and very interesting to me, he's not fundamentally freaked out about it. I think that makes all of this very fucking interesting. That makes this super interesting. Also, what the hell kind of opening 60 pages is that? But anyway, I really did need wine for that. I'm going to have wine on Wednesday. You can absolutely be certain. So, we're over time. I'm going to go. These happen Mondays and Wednesdays this time around, except for possibly maybe one or two changes. Actually, it may be Monday and Wednesday all the way through. But of course, if anything changes, I will make a post here on YouTube and Patreon and all those places. But I think it may actually be pretty steady, which is great because I'm not going to handle this. I don't think I'm going to. I need the following business day to process what the fuck I'm reading because it's all happening. It's just all starting to happen now. So I will see you guys on Wednesday.
At the same time, God hopes I sleep well. And I will see you then to keep unpacking what they keep throwing in my face. Yeah? All right. So please take care of yourselves. And I will see you in a couple of days.